Hey, good day, everybody. Welcome back to Rocky Mountain Readings, where we're reading the wonderful book Sefer Halkkarim. And yesterday we really touched on the qualities and the degrees of prophecy. I think, Rabbi Joseph Albo's giving a clear breakdown of the philosophical principles behind the fundamentals of Judaism, and hopefully it makes good and logical sense. And so we're continuing on from that today. Hopefully you're enjoying this. If you got any comments or questions, feel free to drop them in the chat box. I'll do my best to address them. So let's just jump right back into it. We ended off here yesterday on this paragraph. The prophets and the righteous and the pious differed from each other in the degree of their association with Hashem. There are some whose souls cleaved so intimately to the celestial beings that the powers of heaven were obedient to them and exerted their influence on the matter of this world at their bidding, for their own benefit or for the benefit of others. They could cause rain to come down by their prayer, heal the sick, cause barren women to bear children, cause fire to come down from the heaven, revive the dead, as in the case of Elijah and Elisha. We find that when a person thinks about a palatable article of food or sees another eating sour grapes, the salivary power is aroused and his mouth waters of its own accord. And similarly, when he is thinking about sexual intercourse, the seminal power is aroused and the organ stretches. In the same way, the natural powers of the physical universe are obedient to the pure soul of the prophet. And dew or rain or storm comes at his bidding. For just as the powers of the body were created to serve the powers of the soul, and therefore as soon as the psychic power determines upon anything, the corporeal powers in the limbs are compelled to carry it out. It's just connected. So the physical forces in the world of nature are subservient to the pure souls, the whole universe being as one individual, and obey them. Accordingly, when such a pure soul conceives the coming of dew, or rain, or a great and mighty wind, or an earthquake, or the opening of the earth, and the like, immediately the power which controls the world of genesis and decay is impelled to carry out the conception. Oh, just trying to make sure the stream settings are fine. Okay, seems to be picking up all right. Just had a little spike. Okay, let's keep going. Sorry about the delay. Sometimes the degree of the prophet or pious man goes beyond this measure, so that the celestial powers too are obedient to him and do his will, bringing down fire from heaven, reviving the dead, and the like, since all things are subject and subservient to him, whether he be a prophet or not. This power varies among righteous men, pious men, and the prophets according to the degree in which their souls cleave to the higher beings. In this way, the prophet or the pious man rules over nature and produces signs and wonders in the world according to the measure of his communion with the higher beings. Now, this explains the difference among pious men. There are some who reach such a degree of communion that they can produce signs and wonders in nature, like Hani Me'agal, Rabbi Phinehas ben Yair, Rabbi Hanina ben Dosa, and others, though they did not attain to the degree of prophecy. On the other hand, there are prophets who never performed any sign or miracle, like Jeremiah, Haggai, Zechariah, and Malachi. Others have only one sign to their credit, like Samuel, who caused rain to come down in the season of wheat harvest by praying for it. Others again have 2 or 3 miracles recorded of them, like Isaiah, who brought about the destruction of Sennacherib, the cure of Hezekiah, and the going back of the shadow a number of degrees. Some have still more miracles to their credit, like Elijah and Elisha. All these miracles, however, performed by the prophets, have this in common, that they did not last a long time and were not performed in the presence of all or of a great concourse of people, whereas all the signs and wonders performed by Moses were not merely more numerous than all those of all the other prophets, but they were superior to them in that they were performed in public and lasted a long time. For example, the manna lasted 40 years. Also, the pillar of cloud by day and the pillar of fire by night. For this reason, these differences between the miracles of Moses and those of others are mentioned at the end of the Torah. First, the text refers to the differences between the prophetic inspiration of Moses and that of others in the expression, "And there hath not arisen a prophet since in Israel like unto Moses, whom the Lord knew face to face," as we explained the passage above. Then the text proceeds to explain the differences between the miracles of Moses and those of others, in all the signs and the wonders which the Lord sent him to do. This indicates their great number. Then it says, "In the land of Egypt, to Pharaoh and to all his servants, and to all his land," alluding to the publicity of the miracles in the presence of his opponents. Then referring to their duration, Scripture says, "And in all the great terror which Moses wrought in the light of all Israel." This refers, as we said, to the pillar of cloud by day and the pillar of fire by night, which lasted all the 40 years that the Israelites were in the wilderness. As we read, "For the cloud of the Lord was upon the tabernacle by day, and there was fire therein by night, in the sight of all the house of Israel throughout all their journeys." This is a way to understand the conception of prophecy and its various degrees, as shown logically and in the difference between the prophecy and miracles of Moses and those of the other prophets. This is what we intended to show. A beautiful explanation on the question of prophecy, how it functions, how it differs from the soothsayers and astrologers, and then the degree in which it stayed. That's amazing. Chapter 11. What we said above concerning the manner in which the various degrees of prophetic inspiration come upon a person holds good when there is no prophet whom man may serve as a medium or instrument through whom inspiration may come to those who are not prepared. But when there is such a prophet, inspiration may come to those unprepared, without reference to the degrees mentioned. This possibility was realized at the time of the revelation on Sinai, when all Israel, the foolish as well as the wise, attained to the prophetic quality. "These words the Lord spoke unto all your assembly in the mount out of the midst of the fire." And not merely did they attain to prophetic inspiration, but they reached the degree called face to face, which is the highest that anyone can attain and which requires the grace of God. The degree attained by Moses, for we read concerning Moses, "And the Lord spoke to Moses face to face." And similarly, in reference to the degree reached by all Israel at the time of the Sinaitic revelation, we read likewise, "The Lord spoke with you face to face in the mount out of the midst of the fire." Now it is clear that the 600,000 men who came out of Egypt on foot and had been accustomed to hard work in clay and bricks were not worthy of so high a degree, and yet they attained it through the instrumentality of Moses. God said to him, "Go, I come unto thee in a thick cloud, that the people may hear when I speak with thee." The meaning of the verse is this: I wish to come to you and to reveal myself to you in the highest degree, face to face, though you are clothed in the thickness and obscurity of matter, symbolized by a thick cloud, and are not worthy of it. All this I do in order that the people may hear when I speak with you. This is the highest degree possible, namely that a person in the waking state should hear a voice speaking to him without seeing any form. You heard the voice of words, but you saw no form, is what the scripture says. This degree the people attained through the grace of God and the instrumentality of Moses, in order that they might give up the doubt which they entertained concerning the possibility of a human being receiving prophetic inspiration. They expressed their wonder after the revelation, saying, "For who is there of all flesh that hath heard the voice of the living God?" This shows that the Israelites doubted the possibility of prophetic inspiration until that day. But Moses did not wonder at the prophetic inspiration of an individual, but at the attainment thereto by the whole people. Hence he said, "Did ever a people hear the voice of God?" After the revelation, they all acknowledge the possibility, as we read, "We have seen this day that God doth speak with man, and he liveth." This proves that the experience at that time removed the doubt from their mind. Very important point. In the same way, the prophetic power was communicated by Elijah to Elisha without the preparatory degrees, for there was not a single one of the sons of the prophets who did not serve Elijah and learn from him before Elisha came to serve Elijah. For only when God wanted to take Elijah away did he say to him in Horeb, "And Elisha the son of Shaphat of Abel-Meholah shalt thou anoint to be prophet in thy room." Through the instrumentality of Elijah, he attained to a higher degree than any of them. Also, Joshua owed the degree which he attained to the instrumentality of Moses, and hence the rabbis, in discussing this matter, say, "The face of Moses was like that of the sun, and the face of Joshua was like that of the moon." The elders of that generation used to say, "Oh, the shame and the disgrace." The meaning is, Joshua himself was not worthy to attain the degree which he did. It was due to the instrumentality of Moses. Therefore Moses was like the sun, who gives of his light to the moon, while Joshua was like the moon, which receives her light from the sun, having none of her own. Hence they said, "Oh, the shame and the disgrace," that Joshua himself should not have been worthy of prophecy and should get it through Moses only. Similarly, the 70 elders owed their prophetic gift to the instrumentality of Moses, not having been worthy of it in their own right. "And I will come down and speak with thee there, and I will take of the Spirit which is upon thee, and I will put it upon them." The meaning is, though they are not worthy of it on their own account. Hence, when Joshua said to Moses, "Eldad and Medad are prophesying in the camp," Moses replied, "Art thou jealous for my sake?" He meant to say, "You should not be jealous on my account, for the prophetic spirit comes upon them through my spirit and instrumentality. Would that all the Lord's people were prophets, on their account worthy in their own right without my influence, that the Lord would put his spirit upon them, not through my instrumentality, but that they should themselves be worthy of the prophetic spirit without any intermediary." The need of a medium may be explained as follows. When a spark of sunlight strikes a bright body like a polished mirror, it is reflected upon a dark place, which is then illuminated by the reflection, not having been illuminated before. Similarly, when the divine influence descends upon a perfect prophet, it is reflected from him upon one who is not worthy, thus inspiring with the prophetic spirit one who is not perfect and not prepared, and causing him to prophesy. Still, even in the case of reflection, the one who is prepared gets a greater portion than he who is not prepared. Makes sense. My opinion is that this is the reason why prophecy existed among the people of Israel in the land of Palestine and not among the other nations in other lands. The Shekinah rested upon the ark and the tables of stone, and from these it was reflected like a ray of sunlight. And the prophetic spirit then rested upon a person who had in him a certain preparation analogous to the contents of the ark. That is, a person who really had the ideas of the Torah which are written upon the tables of the covenant. We find this illustration in the prophecy of Samuel. He lay in his chamber, and the prophetic voice came to him from above the ark cover, which was upon the ark that was then in Shiloh. Samuel himself did not know who called him, for he did not think that he was worthy of the prophetic gift, that he should hear a voice in the waking state instead of a prophetic vision. Therefore he rose from his bed and he went to Eli until Eli understood, as we read, and Eli perceived that the Lord was calling the child. An inspiration of this kind, which comes in this way without the meditation of a prophet, requires preparation in the recipient. That is, the recipient must be himself prepared to a certain extent. Divine inspiration of this nature comes only when the recipient has a certain degree of preparation, and upon this is dependent the degree of inspiration which comes to him. The prophetic inspiration, however, which comes through the mediation of a prophet, comes also to a person who is not worthy of prophecy, as it came to all Israel at the time of the Sinaitic revelation. Or it comes to one who is not prepared for it, as it came to Aaron and Miriam, through the mediation of Moses, though they were not prepared for it at that time. This is the reason why the Lord called Moses with Aaron and Miriam, so that the prophetic spirit should come upon them through the mediation of Moses. For though they were worthy of the prophetic gift, they were not prepared for it at that time. This matter requires attention, for many learned men have wondered why God called Moses with Aaron and Miriam. It is worth noting that when the prophetic spirit comes through the mediation of a prophet upon a person who is not worthy or who is not prepared, the recipient is able to pass it to another only when the nation has in its midst the ark and the tables. Moreover, after the ark disappeared, the unprepared could not get a prophetic inspiration even through a prophet. This is why Baruch, son of Neriah, did not receive the prophetic gift through Jeremiah, because he was not prepared for it, and the ark had been hidden. Prophetic inspiration did come to Haggai, Zechariah, and Malachi, because they saw Jeremiah and Ezekiel and were prepared for it, were more prepared for it than Baruch. But it did not reach others through them, because the ark was not there, and the inspiration they received was not sufficient to pass from them to others, since there was no ark. The proof of this is that there was no prophecy during the second temple, though there were at that time pious men of God, of good works, more worthy of prophetic inspiration than the men of the first temple. The reason was because they did not have the ark. Ezekiel could receive his inspiration outside of Palestine because he had already received it in Palestine, as our rabbis explain in the verses in Ezekiel. The word of the Lord came expressly unto Ezekiel the priest, the son of Buzi, in the land of the Chaldeans by the river Chebar. They construe the verb as meaning it came because it had come before. Chapter 12. The principal purpose of the prophetic institution existing in the human race is not to foretell the future or to regulate particular matters that interest individuals, such as are communicated by diviners and stargazers, but to enable a whole nation or the entire human race to attain to human perfection. Very key point. The rabbis make this clear in the treatise Berachot, commenting upon the biblical verse. And the Lord spoke unto Moses, Go get thee down, for thy people have dealt corruptly. They say, God said to Moses, Get thee down from thy greatness. I gave it thee only for the sake of Israel. Now that Israel has sinned, why do I want thee? This clearly shows that the prophetic gift of Moses was given to him solely for the sake of Israel, that they might receive the Torah and fulfill it. We find the same idea in Torat Kohanim, commenting on the verse. These are the commandments which the Lord commanded Moses for the children of Israel. They say it was the merit of Israel. It was the merit of Israel that was responsible for Moses receiving divine inspiration. Hence, some learned men say that the beginning of Moses' prophetic experience did not take place in the gradual manner we described in chapter 10, but that it was a miraculous phenomenon and came upon him suddenly by the will of God, though he was neither prepared nor worthy of that high degree. The purpose being that the human race or the Jewish nation as a whole should attain to the destined end of man. This is why God said to him, Now that Israel has sinned, why do I need you? That is, if I cannot realize my purpose, there is no need of the prophet's inspiration. This is the reason why the rabbis say in the treatise Nedarim, prophecy rests only upon a person who is wise, strong, rich, and tall. They derive these requisite qualities from Moses. Since the prophetic gift is bestowed for the sake of the nation's perfection, the prophet must have the qualities of Moses, whose prophetic gift was given to him for the same purpose. Therefore, one of these attributes is tall stature, so that he should be admired and respected by the people. But if a prophet has not these qualities which are for the people's benefit, there is no purpose in giving him the prophetic gift. This will also explain why we made revelation of the Torah a fundamental principle, while we considered prophecy as a derivative principle dependent upon the former, though one might suppose that the reverse is true, namely that prophecy is the fundamental thing in revelation of the Torah, the derivative. The truth is this: If the perfect purpose of the prophetic institution among men were that people may know the particular events of the world, or that by means of it signs and wonders may be produced for a particular purpose, as might seem at first sight, then the objection would be well taken. But since we have made clear that the necessity of prophecy is that men may be guided towards eternal happiness, that they may know through it what is agreeable to God and what is not, and that they may attain to the destiny intended for mankind by doing those things which are agreeable to God, the above objection does not hold, for since the purpose of prophecy is that the human race may be guided by God, which means revelation of the Torah, the latter must be a fundamental principle, because it is that which makes prophecy necessary. For this reason, we consider prophecy a derivative principle dependent on revelation. For the same reason, we also considered providence a subordinate principle derived from reward and punishment, though it might appear that the reverse is true. One might say that since providence precedes reward and punishment, the latter is derived from it. The answer is as follows. If God's providence of human individuals were of the same nature as in the other animals, namely the preservation of their species, reward and punishment would be derivative from providence. But it is not so. The providence which we consider as a principle is not the kind which provides for the lower animals by maintaining the species merely, but the kind that rewards a man according to his deeds both in this world and in the next, as the divine wisdom decrees. Hence we consider reward and punishment a fundamental principle, and providence a subordinate principle derived from the former, because the providence which is concerned with reward and punishment is not the same as that which has to do with the lower animals, preserving merely the species. In the same way must be understood all the relations of the subordinate principles to the fundamental ones, where the former are prior, where the former are prior to the latter. Thus, prophecy is prior to the nature of revelation of the Torah, and prior in time also, for the prophetic inspiration of the patriarchs came before the revelation of the Torah through Moses, and yet we consider prophecy subordinate to revelation of the Torah. The reason is because all the instances of prophecy that occurred before the revelation of the Torah were for the purpose of the Torah. And similarly, all the prophetic teachings of the prophets who came after the Torah were for the purpose of the fulfillment of the Torah, inasmuch as in the mind of an agent the purpose or final cause is necessarily prior to the other causes. Our rabbis say that Torah came 2,000 years before the world. The Torah is the purpose for the sake which the human race was created, which is the highest form of existence in the world of Genesis and decay. All other things for the sake of man, and man exists for the sake of Torah. This principle may be applied to all the other dogmas which we considered as derived from the fundamental principles. A big key of logic in there. Chapter 13. We now desire to investigate whether it is possible that a given divine law of a given people should change in time, or whether it cannot change but must be eternal. Okay, very deep point. It would seem that a divine law cannot change for the reasons based upon a consideration of the giver, of the recipient, and of the law itself. Considering the giver, it would seem inconceivable that God, who is the giver, should desire one thing at one time and then change his will and desire its opposite at another time. It cannot be that God should desire right at one time and wrong at another. Why then should God change his law for another? Considering the recipient, we cannot see why, since the nation is the same, the law should change in the course of time. We cannot use the analogy of the individual and say that just as the rules of health for a child are different from those of a young man, and those of a young man are different from those of an old man, as the time changes from childhood to youth or from youth to old age, so the rules of divine law must change with the times. For while it may be true in the case of an individual that his behavior is bound to change as the period of his life changes, The rule does not apply to a political group in which there is no such change from childhood to youth into old age, for the convention of law is that all the times are the same. Hence, we cannot see that divine law should change by reason of the recipient. Now, if we consider the law itself, it would seem that since the purpose of the divine Torah is to teach men intellectual conceptions and true opinions, there can be no reason for its changing at any time, for true opinions can never change. Monotheism cannot be true at one time and dualism or Trinitarianism at another, any more than it is possible that a thing that has already been should change and not have been. It seems clear, therefore, that there can be no change in a divine law, whether we consider the law itself, the giver, or the recipient. Nevertheless, if we consider the matter carefully, we shall find that it does not necessarily follow that divine law cannot be changed for one and the same people. For though the ideas themselves do not change, nor the giver, a change may occur on the part of the recipient. A perfect agent does his work in a manner corresponding to the preparation of the recipient. As that changes, the work of the agent changes, no doubt. Nor does this imply any change in the agent. A physician prescribes a certain regimen to his patient for a term known to himself, which he does not reveal to the patient. When that time passes and the recipient gets better, the physician changes his regimen. He allows what he prohibited before and forbids what he formerly permitted. The patient has no reason to wonder at this, for it does not imply any change in the physician's original intention or imperfection in the physician, because he did not, in the first place, prescribe a regimen good for all time. And that's where they think during the time of the Mashiach, a complete change of state to the point where only certain things become necessary from the Torah. Where there's a complete, nobody will have to teach each other saying, know the Lord, because everybody will know him from the greatest to the least. A complete paradigm shift for sure. When the physician prescribed the first regimen, he knew the length of time that the patient would have to conform to it. And though he did not say anything to the patient, he knew when the regimen would have to change, estimating as he did from the condition of the patient the time required to pass from the disease to health. When he prescribed the first regimen, his purpose was to improve the condition of the patient so that he might be ready and prepared to follow the second regimen, which was to come after its work had been done by the first. And when the time came, he changed the first regimen for another, which he had in mind in the first place. Stages of development, if you think about it. In the same way, it argues no defect in God if he did not give at the beginning a law and a regimen that would suffice for all times. For when he gave the Torah, he knew that the law would suffice for the time which in his wisdom he estimated would be required to prepare the recipients and improve their condition so as to fit them to receive the second regiment, though he did not reveal this purpose of his to anyone. When the time comes, he gives the second regimen, which may contain rules different from and opposed to the first, but it was in his mind from the beginning. On the contrary, as it would show a defect in the physician if he prescribed solid and substantial food like bread and meat and wine for convalescents and children and infants before they grow up or are strong enough to stand such food. So it would argue a defect in the giver of the Torah if he gave the same law for the time to novices and to habituates. The proper thing is to change according to the change in the capacity of the recipients. As soon as they are accustomed to an easy regimen, he can advance them to a more difficult one, suitable to their nature, like bread and meat and wine and other substantial foods, which, though unsuitable for children, are fit and proper for adults. And children, as they grow up and become accustomed to solid food, change their mode of sustenance. A teacher treats his pupil in similar manner. First, he trains him in matters easy to understand until he gets accustomed to study little by little. Then he advances him to a more difficult and more profound plane for which he was not fit at the beginning before he became accustomed to study. And so are the trials of life function like this. And if one object to it is not fitting to suppose that God's power is so limited that he cannot prescribe a rule of conduct that will embrace all men, young and old, for all time, his objection would be analogous to the question that is asked, why did not God create all men righteous and eager to worship him, so that there be not one that is crooked, assuming that this would show perfection? The fact is not so, as Rambam has shown, touching this and similar matters in the 32nd chapter of the third part of the Guide for the Perplexed. We do not say that perfection would require that God should have created all animals with reason to praise him, because it is contrary to nature. Similarly, we do not say that it would be a credit to God if all things happened by way of a miracle and not in accordance with natural law. For all theologians are agreed that nature is precious to God, and he does not change it except when it is absolutely necessary. We are here discussing this subject as reason demands and as a study of the Torah suggests. Anyone who chooses may disagree and insist that God constantly creates miracles in opposition to nature. When the rabbis say that the Torah is a panacea and a drug that gives life to all, they mean for all the organs of the body. Similarly, they say that the words of the Torah are a slave for the eye, an emollient for the heart, and a medicine for the bowels, as it is said, and health to all their flesh. But they do not say that it is the same for all men, women, and children, and for all time. The truth of our statement will be made clear in the following chapter. Chapter 14. If we investigate the divine laws of the world, we find that they changed from time to time, forbidding what was originally permitted, and then again permitting what had been forbidden. Thus, in the beginning, Adam was given a few commandments which, according to the tradition of our rabbis, mankind followed till the time of Noah. Noah was permitted to eat animal food, which was forbidden to Adam. Originally, animal food was forbidden to Adam, plants alone being permitted. Behold, I have given you every green herb yielding seed which is upon the face of all the earth, and every tree in which the fruit of a tree yielding seed, to you it shall be for food. Later, Noah was given permission to eat animal food. Every moving thing that liveth shall be for food for you, as the green herb have I given you all. An additional commandment was given to him, forbidding him to eat a limb cut from the living animal. Abraham was given an additional commandment of circumcision. Moses received many other commandments. Also, God prohibited certain marriages and of relations which were permitted to the Noahites, and permitted to certain matters which were forbidden to the Noahites. Thus, an Israelite may eat an animal after it's slaughtered, even though it is still struggling, whereas a Noahite would deserve the penalty of death if he ate the animal before it died, for it would come under the prohibition of eating the limb of a living animal. Similarly, a Noahite is punishable with death if he is guilty of robbery, even to the extent of less than a pruta, not so an Israelite. Also, a Noahite, seeing another committing a robbery without preventing him, is guilty of a capital crime. This is why all the inhabitants of Shechem deserved the punishment of death, because they saw Shechem committing a robbery and did not prosecute him. As the Rambam says in Sofer Sheftim, also a Noahite who marries a half-sister on the father's side goes unpunished, whereas an Israelite guilty of such an act is punishable with death. So there is vast differences. We find even a more remarkable statement than this in Sifri by way of comment on the verse. Neither shalt thou set thee up a pillar which the Lord thy God hateth, though it was dear to God in the days of the patriarchs, is the comment made here, or there made. And this includes the time of Moses also. For at the time of the Sinaitic revelation, he built an altar at the foot of the mountain, and he set up the 12 pillars for the 12 tribes of Israel. The prohibition came in the plains of Moab in the 40th year, when God said to Jacob, I am the God of Bethel, where thou didst anoint the pillar. It is clear, therefore, that a thing which the worshipper of God were in the habit of doing in God's honor, and which was absolutely permitted in the time of Moses at the Sinaitic revelation, was forbidden in the plains of Moab, according to the opinion of the rabbis. So far as certain marriages of affinities are concerned, which were permitted for the Noahites, we see them expressly forbidden in the Bible. All this shows that the divine law did change, now permitting, now forbidding, in accordance with the times. This was the situation in the times of Adam, Noah, and Abraham until Moses came. There has been no change since his day. The opinion of the Rambam is that the Torah will never change in whole or in part. Hence, one of his principal dogmas is the immutability of the Torah. Now, inasmuch as we found that divine laws which existed before Moses did undergo changes in the matter of permission and prohibition, immutability would be a principle peculiar to the Mosaic law. Rambam bases this dogma upon the scriptural passage, "Thou shalt not add thereto nor diminish from it." The reason he gives in the Guide for the Perplexed is because a thing which is harmonious and perfect cannot have anything added to it or taken away from it, as the harmony and perfection would be destroyed. But the Torah is perfect, as Scripture testifies. The law of the Lord is perfect, restoring the soul. Therefore, it can never be changed. This is the gist of the Rambam's opinion in this matter, as expressed in a number of places. But his ideas on this point require careful consideration in respect to their source. The dogma is surely of great importance. Nevertheless, we must know whether Rambam derives it from tradition or from his own rationality. If the former, we must gracefully accept it, but if the latter, we have something to say about it. The prohibition against adding to or subtracting from the commandments has no reference to the number of commandments, but to the manner of performing them. The meaning of the prohibition is that we should not invent of our own mind or borrow from the idolaters some addition or diminution in the manner of performing the commandments because we may think it does greater honor to God. The context proves that this is the meaning. In section Rea, the Bible warns against idolatry. When the Lord thy God shall cut off the nations from before thee, whither thou goest in to dispossess them, take heed to yourself that thou be not ensnared to follow them, after that they are destroyed from before thee, and that thou inquire not after their gods, saying, How use these nations to serve their gods? Even so I will do likewise. Thou shalt not do so unto the Lord thy God, for every abomination to the Lord which he hateth have they done unto their gods, for even their sons and their daughters that do they burn in the fire to their gods. All this word which I command you, that shall you observe to do, thou shalt not add thereto nor diminish from it. Now there is something strange in the sequence of thought in the above passage. Take heed to yourself that thou be not ensnared to follow them, after that they are destroyed from before you. Would a person be likely to be ensnared to follow them after he has seen them destroyed? Why then does the text connect the idea of inquiry after their gods with their destruction? The explanation of the text is this. The Bible is concerned that one should not be enticed in any manner after idolatrous practices. Therefore, it says, a person might make a mistake and suppose that the reason God commanded the destruction of the idolaters is because they offered to the idols the honorable service that is becoming to God. Hence, the text says, after destroying the idolaters, you might inquire after the manner in which they worship their idols, thinking to do likewise and to serve God in the manner in which they serve their idols, believing that it would be doing God a great honor. This is where we see a lot of B'nai Noach leave Christianity, and they bring strange ideas, and they don't realize that it's not required, and it's a strange notion. Hence the Bible says, and that thou inquire not after their gods, saying, How use these nations to serve their gods? Even so will I do likewise, i.e. to God. Thou shalt not do unto the Lord thy God. Then comes the reason. For every abomination to the Lord which he hates have they done unto their gods. The meaning is, you must not suppose that the reason God forbids those practices is because he is jealous on account of their being performed for others, but because they are despicable and an abomination in his eyes. And the proof of it is that even their sons and their daughters do they burn in the fire to their gods. They think this is doing honor to God, but it is an abomination to him, for God does not desire the destruction of the world, nor does he command the killing of human beings. So the rabbis comment in the treatise Ta'anit on the statement of Jeremiah, and they have built the high places of Tophet to burn their sons and their daughters in the fire, which I commanded not, nor spoke it, neither came it into my mind. I commanded not, say the rabbis, referred to the son of Mesha, the king of Moab, concerning whom it is said, then he took his eldest son, that should have reigned in his stead, and offered him for a burnt offering upon the wall. Nor spoke it refers to the daughter of Jephthah the Gileadite, neither came it into my mind, refers to Isaac the son of Abraham. Mesha, the king of Moab, was never commanded to offer sacrifices as Israel was. Therefore he is referred to by the expression, I commanded not. Jephthah was an Israelite and was commanded to offer sacrifices, but God never spoke to him that he should make burnt offerings of his daughter, hence nor spoke it. And as for Abraham, God did not command him to offer sacrifices, and also spoke to him, telling him to offer Isaac his son as a burnt offering. But his intention was not that he should actually sacrifice him, hence the expression, neither came it into my mind, is referred to Isaac the son of Abraham. The rabbis thus make clear that God does not desire sacrifices. This is a key point, whereas Christianity thinks such of Judaism and missed the whole point. The meaning of the Bible, therefore, is, do not think to honor God by performing for him those services which the idolaters did for their gods. For far from being agreeable to him, they are an abomination to him. For every abomination to the Lord which he hates have they done unto their gods, for even their sons and their daughters do they burn in the fire to their gods. Then the Bible sums up the matter and explains how God should be worshipped. All this word which I command you that you shall observe to do, thou shalt not add thereto nor diminish from it. The meaning is, you must not merely do anything that was not commanded, but you must not make any additions in the manner of the service. This is also the explanation given by Nachmanides in his commentary on section Ria, and we find the same idea in Sifri. Hence they said that if the blood that requires one sprinkling is mixed with other blood that requires one sprinkling, there shall be only one sprinkling. For from this verse, Sifri makes an inference applying to all the commandments of the Torah. How do we know that it is not allowed to add to the lulav and the tzitzik? Answer, thou shalt not add thereto. How do we know that it is not allowed to take away? Answer, nor diminish from it. How do we know that if he began to pronounce the priestly benediction, he must not say, since I began the benediction, I may as well add the words, the Lord, the God of your fathers, add unto you. Answer, the text says, this word meaning, you must not add even a word. Thus we find express support for our view. Rashi, in his commentary on section Ve'athanan, says, in explaining the words, you shall not add unto the word which I command you, for example, to have 5 compartments in the phylacteries, and similar is the meaning of the expression, neither shall you diminish from it. There is therefore no proof in the verses of Ramban's opinion. Moreover, if the meaning of the text were to forbid adding to or taking away from the number of the commandments, how could the rabbis say that the court may decide to suspend a biblical commandment, where the suspension involves merely non-feasance? Is the court allowed to violate the command not to diminish from it? Similarly, Solomon, who introduced the Arab and the washing of the hands, was guilty of violating the commandment not to add thereto. In short, I do not see any evidence in the passage cited by Maimonides that the immutability is a dogma of the Mosaic law at all, as the Rambam thinks. Yeah, so this is where people need to understand there's difference between tradition and commandment for sure. And it's the difference between halakha and minhag. Yeah. Moreover, assuming that the biblical expressions have the meaning he gives to them, that does not prove that the Torah will never be repealed or changed. The Bible merely warns us not to add or to take away from the commandments on our own account. But what can there be to prevent God himself from adding or diminishing as his wisdom decrees? As for the argument that an equal and the mean can never be added to or taken away from, that applies to the true and absolute mean, whereas the relative mean may very well change with the nature of the recipients. Thus, food that is fitting for a child is milk, while for an adult the proper food is bread and meat and wine. Similarly, a divine commandment can change with times. Thus, flesh was forbidden to Adam and permitted to Noah and his descendants by reason of the degeneration of Cain and his descendants, as we shall explain later. Some have written that the reason Adam was forbidden to eat meat is because the world was new, and if Adam had been allowed to eat meat, many animal species might have been exterminated. But this cannot be the reason, for in that case, permission should not have been given to Noah and his children either, for in their time also the number of animals was small. While Noah and his 3 sons and their wives were more than Adam and Eve, who were the only persons in existence when they were forbidden to eat meat. Moreover, if the explanation be as these men say, then there was no reason for again forbidding Israel the meat of certain animals. At any rate, it is thus proved that though divine laws are not completely repealed, they may change in the permissions and prohibitions, as the character of the recipients changes. Chapter 15. We must now explain the reason for that change that we have found, namely that which was forbidden to Adam was permitted to Noah, and that a part of that which was permitted to Noah was forbidden to Israel. In order to explain this properly, we must first inquire what was Cain's sin when he brought an offering to God from the fruit of the ground, as a result of which God refused to have respect unto him or his present. Was it that he did not bring the best of the sheep and the rams of Nebaioth, as Abel did? Surely this is no sin. If his occupation was the tilling of the ground, and he prospered therein, and he brought of its fruit as a present to God, to thank him for his benefits, why did the Lord refuse to have respect unto him or his offering? It stands to reason that when a person receives a benefit from another, having been treated with food and drink, he should return the thanks to his benefactor, corresponding to the kindness which he received. He is not obliged to thank him for having clothed and enriched him if he has done nothing of the sort, but the thanksgiving must correspond to the benefit received, if it is not greater. That is, no cause for criticism, and surely does not involve guilt. And if we say that Cain's sin consisted in the fact that he did not bring the fruit of the tree, but only the fruit of the ground, as we said before, this did not deserve such severe punishment as expressed in the verse, "If thou doest well, shall it not be lifted up? And if thou doest not well, sin stands at the door." The question also suggests itself. Since God favored Abel as well as his present, how is it that he was killed? Okay, we answered these questions in our Genesis class. Why did not an angel of God protect the God-fearing man and save him from death? Another question is, why is it that we read about Seth and begot a son in his own likeness after his image, while there is no such expression in reference to Abel, though God favored his present? These are really deeper questions. The explanation of all this is, I think, as follows. In the killing of animals, There is cruelty, rage, and the accustoming oneself to the bad habit of shedding innocent blood. But the eating of the flesh of some animals produces, besides coarseness, ugliness, and stupidity, as is stated in the Bible. After prohibiting the food of certain animals to Israel, the text ends up, "You shall not make for yourselves detestable, ... Neither shall you make yourselves unclean with them, that you should be defiled thereby." The word translated as defiled is written without an LF, thus indicating that the forbidden food produces mental coarseness and obtuseness. And this is why they don't eat predatory animals, or all non-kosher. Yeah, so when people understand that no predatory animals are in the kosher list, and there's no prohibitions on vegetables at all. The rabbis also say, in reference to the verse in question, transgression of a law stupefies a person, as it is said that you should be defiled thereby. Read not defiled or be stupefied. This is so where it says be defiled, they mean stupefied. This is the reason why, though the flesh of a certain animal is good for food and suitable for man, God chose to deprive him of the slight good of eating the meat in order to prevent the much greater evil which might result therefrom. You say, what you eat? This is why he forbade Adam the eating of animal food. He made up for this loss of good food by assigning to Adam vegetable food, which was very good and nourishing, like wheat, barley, and the other seed-bearing plants that can be sown. Also all those trees which bear fruit having seed in them. To other animals he gave for food all green grass, so that has no seed that may be planted. The purpose of this was to show the superiority of the human species to the other animals. When Cain and Abel were born and saw their father Adam laboring in the tillage of the ground and planting wheat and barley and other grains and nourishing himself by eating the plants, each one of them chose his own way, indicating his purpose and ideas in his practice. Cain took to tilling the ground because he thought that the only superiority of man to the animals consisted in his ability to till the ground and live on the choice plants. Seeing that Adam lived on plants like the animals, he thought that the spirit is the same in all and that all die alike. Therefore, he brought an offering of the fruit of the ground to thank God for the superiority he gave him over the plants. He did not bring animal offering because he did not think that his superiority to them in the ability to till the ground was important enough to warrant bringing an offering. Part of his sin consisted, as we said before, in the fact that instead of bringing fruit of the tree, which is the best of the plant life, he brought of the fruit of the ground, i.e., green vegetables. But his main offense was that he did not think that man's superiority to the animals amounted to anything. Also, he thought that he was forbidden to kill animals because they were like him and were subject to death like him. He thought, too, that the main purpose of man is to eat and drink, since he fed on plants like the animals. So you can see there's just was fault in his logic. Abel, on the other hand, thought that man was superior to animals, but that the superiority lay in the fact that he has control over them and can subdue them and make them do his work. But he did not think that man was authorized to kill the animals. So far, human superiority did not reach, according to his opinion. Hence we read, and Abel he also brought of the firstlings of his flock. The meaning is, he too thought like Cain that man is not allowed to kill animals except for God, as an offering to show that God is superior to both man and animal. For he remains forever while they perish. Man is superior only, he thought, in that he pastures them, governs countries, and so on. This is why Abel was killed, because his opinion was close to that of Cain and more calculated to mislead men. Interesting point. Nevertheless, Abel held that man has superiority over the animals and controls them, and is allowed to kill them for God, an opinion which is likely to lead to a recognition of the general superiority of man over animals. Also, he recognized the greatness of the Lord and brought of the firstborn of his flock and of their fat ones. Hence, God had respect unto Abel in his offering, because it was nearer the truth than the opinion of Cain. But he did not have respect unto Cain in his offering, because he was very far from the truth, since he thought that man had no superiority over the animals, and failed to appreciate the greatness of God, in that he brought the fruit of the ground instead of the fruit of the tree, as we said before. Therefore God said to him, Why art thou wroth, and why is thy countenance fallen? If thou doest well, shall it not be lifted up? The meaning is, you are right. Man is born as a wild donkey, and has no superiority over the animal in actuality when he comes into the world. But he has superior potentially if he practices goodness and realizes his potentialities and recognizes the greatness of the Lord. If he does well, he will be lifted up above the animals. This is the meaning of the expression, if thou doest well, shall it not be lifted up? For this reason, envy took hold of Cain, and he killed Abel, for he still held the opinion that man is not superior to the animal. Therefore he said to himself, since God favors Abel and is present, it is clear that it is permitted to kill animals, and hence it is just as lawful to kill Abel as any other animal. On the other hand, since Abel's opinion was not altogether correct, he was not protected by God from violence. Then when God revealed himself to Cain and announced his punishment for the crime, Cain did not yet understand that to shed blood, the blood of a human being, is a more serious matter than to shed the blood of an animal. But he thought that he was punished for shedding human blood, so he would be punished for shedding animal blood, since Adam was not permitted to kill animals. For the spirit of man and the spirit of beasts are alike, as the one dies, so the other dies. This erroneous opinion remained among the descendants of Cain until Seth was born, who knew the superiority of man over the animals, as his father Adam did. Therefore it says in reference to him, and he, Adam, begot in his own likeness after his own image. For he alone was in the image of God like Adam, whereas those before him did not understand the dignity of the human form in them, which is in the image of God. According to these three opinions of Cain, Abel, and Seth, respectively, all mankind are divided into three classes. One class follow the opinion of Cain and think that the most important human occupation is agriculture. They feel hostility toward political rulers and desire to kill them, as Cain killed Abel. A second class follow the opinion of Abel, thinking that politics is the most important pursuit, and risk their life for political activity like Abel, because they think that it leads to human perfection, as we are told concerning certain Roman rulers. So kings risk their lives for the sake of power, which is natural to them, as it was to Abel, who was the first shepherd and ruler and lost his life on that account. The third class was the opinion of Seth, thinking that the important thing is to worship God and despise power and the other pleasures. As the opinion of Seth is not easily grasped at first sight, he was followed by only a few rare individuals, but the opinion of Cain was widely prevalent among his descendants, and hence the earth was filled with violence on their account. Their belief being that man has no superiority over animal, and might is right. Therefore they were corrupt and lived like animals. For this reason it was declared that their names should be wiped out from the earth in the flood. When they were all destroyed and only Noah and those with him in the ark remained, God wanted to eradicate this opinion. Hence, when Noah, after leaving the ark, brought an animal offering to God because he knew that man is superior by virtue of his reason and can know his Creator and serve him better than the animals, and can be thankful to God for his privilege, his offering was accepted with favor. As is said, and the Lord smelled a sweet savor. But he feared that unless this opinion was made firm, the Noahites might deviate in the direction of Abel's idea, and assume that God accepted their father's offering as he did Abel's offering, thus going back to the former errors of wrongdoing. Hence, immediately after the offering, he hastened to permit the killing of animals and the eating of their flesh, As the green herb have I given you all. The meaning is that as even Cain admitted that man is superior to the plants, since they are created for man, so all the animals are also for the sake of man, who is superior to them. And there is not the same spirit in all. For this reason he prohibited the shedding of human blood, giving as a reason that the spirit of man is not like the spirit of the animal. For in the image of God made he man. Man has a rational form which is nobler than the spirit of the animal. For this reason it was necessary to permit all animals without distinction, which he did in order to eradicate the former opinion and wipe off its memory. That's a unique statement there for sure about eradicating that memory in the mind of humanity, and don't let it perpetuate. But when the Torah was given to Israel and the opinion in question had been wiped out, God prohibited even certain animals which produce coarseness and ugliness of the soul. Nay, even animals that were permitted were merely a concession to human lust and desire, in the same way that the Israelites were permitted women taken in war. Thus the rabbis say, commenting on the verse, because thy soul desires to eat flesh, there is a moral lesson in this expression, namely that one should not eat flesh unless he has an appetite for it. This shows clearly that the eating of the flesh was permitted only because of necessity. For this reason it was forbidden at the time of creation, though it is good for food, for the reason as we mentioned at the beginning of the chapter. The same is true of wine. It is good food and is permitted, and yet the Bible calls the Nazirite vow, who abstains from it, holy. At any rate, all this shows that a given thing may be forbidden and then permitted, and vice versa. We may say, therefore, that there are matters in divine law which are forbidden for a certain length of time, as God's wisdom decrees, and later are permitted in accordance with the same divine wisdom. There is no evidence in the Bible to the contrary as to the kind of things that may be abolished or repealed. This will be explained later on in this book. Interesting. Chapter 16. Some have thought to prove the eternity of the Mosaic law from the expression which are used in connection with some of the commandments, such as a statute forever, throughout your generations, a sign it is forever. Thus, in connection with the Day of Atonement and the prohibition of the new fruit, we find it is a statute forever throughout your generations in all your dwellings. Okay, so you follow on this point? In connection with the Sabbath, we read, it is a sign between me and the children of Israel forever. In the commandment concerning Passover, we find for an ordinance to thee and to thy sons forever. And so there are other commandments besides in which we find the expression a statute forever, or throughout your generations, or in all your dwellings. This, however, is no proof for the opponent to say. This rather proves that the other commandments will be abolished, since these alone are so qualified. Besides, we are expressly told in the treatise Kiddushin, why do we find the expression in all your dwellings, in connection with the prohibition of fat and blood? Answer, if the expression were not there, we might argue that since the prohibition is found in connection with the sacrifices, it holds only of the time when sacrifices are offered, but not when there are no more sacrifices. In the same place, they explain why the expression a statute forever occurs in the commandments concerning the Day of Atonement and the prohibition of the new fruit, and not in other commandments. And it appears from their answers that if the expression were not there, one might suppose that the commandments in question might become obsolete even while the others are still in force. But the expression in question do not denote the eternity of the law. Okay? For it is possible that when the other commandments are abolished, these will be abolished also. So there's groundwork here, especially for understanding the Messianic era for sure. Nor can any evidence be found of the expression eternity unto eternity, a statute for eternity or to eternity, for these expressions and their like are applied to a limited and not an infinite time. Thus we read, remove not the ancient landmark which thy fathers have set. The word eternity is here used to denote a time limited and dating from the fathers. Other passages are, for of old time I have broken thy yoke. Then shall the offering of Judah and Jerusalem be pleasant unto the Lord, as in the days of old. The plural is also used to denote a finite time, as I will dwell in thy tent forever, O Israel, that art saved by the Lord with an everlasting salvation. This refers to the salvation from Sennacherib. Similarly, in the expression, it has been already in the ages which were before us. The word denotes here a long time. The word is also applied to a finite short time, and as he shall serve him forever, which means until the year of Jubilee. The expression has a similar use. Thus Hannah said, I will bring him that he may appear before the Lord and abide there forever. The expression here means 50 years, which is the term of a Levite, as we find, and from the age of 50 years they shall return from the service of the work and shall serve no more. The expression is also applied to a finite short time and not known to man, but to God alone. Thus Isaiah says, For the palace shall be forsaken, the city with its stir shall be deserted, the mound and the tower shall be for dens forever. And later it says, until the Spirit be poured out upon us from on high. Similarly, the expression, all the days of eternity, is applied to a finite short time. Isaiah says, and he bore them and carried them all the days of old. While in the sequel it says, but they rebelled and grieved his Holy Spirit, therefore he was turned to be their enemy, himself fought against them. In short, none of these expressions, hold on folks, is the stream coming through okay? Okay, in short, none of these expressions or those like them necessarily denotes eternity or infinite time, but each one must be explained from its context. The word, which signifies perpetuity, is applied to a finite brief time. Thus, in reference to the dwelling of the divine glory on Mount Sinai, we read, the mountain which God has desired for his abode, yea, the Lord will dwell therein forever. And there's that same word. But the divine glory did not dwell on Mount Sinai forever. For when the tent of meeting was built, the glory departed from Mount Sinai and dwelled in the tent of the meeting. Similarly, the expression a statute forever does not necessarily signify that the thing will last an infinite time. For in the commandment concerning the candelabrum, we find the expression a statute forever throughout your generations, and yet it has been interrupted from the time of the destruction of the second temple to this day. Similarly, the expression a statute forever is used in relation to the feasts of Passover and Tabernacles, and yet our rabbis say in Vayikra Rabbah that all festivals will be abolished except Purim and the Day of Atonement. It would seem then that their interpretation of the expression a statute forever is that we may not abolish them on our own account. Okay, so there's the definition. It would seem then that the interpretation of the expression when it says a statute forever is that we may not abolish them on our own account, but that there is a possibility of their being abolished by God's command. We find also that in the time of Ezra they ceased counting the months from Nisan, though this is the method of counting prescribed in the Torah. As we read, this month shall be unto you the beginning of months, it shall be the first month of the year to you, this being the first commandment given to Israel. Although Tishri is the beginning of the year when we count the years of the world. As we read, and the feasts of ingathering at the turn of the year, and the feasts of ingathering at the end of the year, and when we compute the sabbatical in the Jubilee years, yet the Torah commands us to count the months from Nisan whenever we count them, because in this month Israel came out of Egypt as a nation Israel as a nation first came into existence. The Torah itself computes all its calculations from Nisan. Thus, and it came to pass in the second year, in the second month, on the 20th day of the month, in the third month, and in the seventh month, on the first day of the month, and on the 10th day of this seventh month is the Day of Atonement. According to the usage of the Torah, the months have no names, but must be called second, third, fourth, fifth, sixth, seventh, beginning with Nisan, in memory of the Exodus from Egypt. This is the meaning of the verse. It shall be the first month of the year to you. That is to say, when you count months, begin with Nisan, though when you count years, you must count from Tishri, as we said before. Very, very good explanation to understand that when you're dealing with semantics with people, often people determine their own definition on words, and it just doesn't apply globally. And you got to look at, when they were being formed as a nation, Hashem was training them even how to count properly from in order to establish their holidays. But I like how he said, that it be established forever, or a statute forever. It only means that there is the possibility of it being abolished by God's command. It means they can't abolish them on their own account. Very, very important to know. But when they returned from Babylon, they desired to commemorate the second deliverance, in which they did in two ways. Okay, you got to realize also too, at that time is when there was the dawn of what is called what is it? It's I don't want to say Aramaic. When the Hebrew letters changed the font from the old Paleo Hebrew to the more squared letters, when they returned from Babylon, it's just a question of getting used to writing with different styluses, and the font changed. But when they returned to Babylon, they desired to commemorate the second deliverance, which they did in two ways. The first was that they discontinued the Hebrew script, adopted from the Assyrian in memory of the redemption from the Assyrian exile. Thus our rabbis say in the Tosefta and Treatise Sanhedrin, why is it called Asherit? That's what the word I was looking for, Asherit, because it came with them from Assyria, from Ashur, the Assyrian captivity. Rabbis say the Torah was given to Israel in 3 characters, and the reason it is called Asherit is because it is the most excellent of writings. It's just, a font, different font, rather than they didn't alter the script. There was minor, very, very minor differences to the old Hebrew, but they have clear connection with it. But it was called Asherit. According to the sense of the Gemara in the beginning of the chapter of Kol Kitbe, it seems that the characters we now use in which our books are written are not Hebrew. If so, we may say that the rabbis' difference of opinion consists merely in the saying that since the tables of stone were written in these characters, the name Asherit was not given to them because they came from Assyria, but he admits that the Hebrew characters used by the people anciently were changed. But even if we grant that he does not agree that there was a change, it matters not, because his opinion, that of a single person, does not count against the opinion of the majority of wise men. Moreover, the Sanhedrin in chapter Kohen Gadol, the Amorim explained the words of the wise men. The passage is as follows. Rab Hisda says in the name of Mar Ukba, originally the Torah was given to Israel in Hebrew characters and in the holy tongue. When the exiles came back in the days of Ezra, they chose Assyrian characters and the holy tongue, leaving the Hebrew characters to the common people, i.e. the Kuthians who lived in Palestine before the exile came. These used the Hebrew characters in the Aramaic language. The Amorim therefore agree that the characters now in use are not Hebrew. Nachmanides also testifies that when he was in Palestine, he found in Akbo an ancient silver coin with the jar of manna and the rod of Aaron engraved upon it, and with characters all around that he could not read. When they showed it to the Kuthians, who retained the ancient Hebrew characters, they read it. These are the words which he adds as a note at the end of his commentary, which he sent from Palestine, from which it is clear that the characters now in use are not Hebrew. As for the statement of the rabbis that the Mem and the Samek maintained themselves on the tables of stone by a miracle, it may be cited this statement is made according to the opinion of Rabbi that the tables of stone were written in Asherit or square characters, or else they also held the opinion that the tables of stone were written in the square characters, though the people at that time used the Hebrew characters. Or it may be that they were not referring to the Mem and the Samek, which are now used, and that in the Hebrew characters in which the tables were written, the Mem and the Samek were closed letters, or there were other letters similar to the Mem and the Samek of the square characters now in use. For Rab Hista himself, who said that the Mem and the Samek in the tables maintained themselves by a miracle, holds that the characters were changed. It is possible that the expression they chose the square characters refers to the whole alphabet, but not only to a part. They selected some of the square characters and left the rest. Thus the Mem and the Samek were retained in their closed form, and they were in the as they were in the tables, though some of the square characters were adopted in memory of the second deliverance. This is, however, not likely. At any rate, it is clear from all that went before that they changed the whole or part of their writing in memory of the second deliverance. And they also did another thing in memory of the second deliverance, namely, they ceased counting the months from Nisan, as they had been accustomed to do in memory of the exodus from Egypt, and adopted another method of counting. This is what our rabbis mean when they say the names of the month came with them from Assyria. That is to say, they counted the months by name, Tishri, Marshava, Kislev, and they did as they did in Assyria, in memory of the second deliverance, and not second, third, fourth, as they did before. This is also the explanation of Archimedes in his commentary on the section Bo. It seems from this, then, that they understood the Pentateuchal commandment concerning the numbering of the months to be temporary, as long as that deliverance lasted. But after they were exiled a second time and were delivered again, they were told by Jeremiah, they shall no more say, as the Lord liveth, that brought up the children of Israel out of the land of Egypt, but as the Lord liveth, that brought up and led the seed of the house of Israel out of the north country. They thought that it was proper to give up the first mode of counting, which was in memory of the exodus from Egypt, and adopted a different one, beginning with Tishri, when they counted the years of the world. And they also retained the names of the months which they brought with them from Assyria in memory of the second deliverance. For they understood that the commandment in the Pentateuch to count the months from Nisan was temporary and not perpetual, though there is no mention of time. Very important to note. There is nothing, therefore, to prevent us from supposing that the divine law may in the future permit some things which are forbidden now, like fat or blood or the slaughter of animals outside the temple. These things were originally forbidden when the Israelites left Egypt because they were addicted to the worship of evil spirits and ate the flesh with the blood, and also ate fat and blood, as we read in relation to the killing of animals outside of the temple. And they shall no more sacrifice their sacrifices unto the satyrs, after whom they go astray. But when this form of worship has been forgotten, and all people shall worship God, and the reason of the prohibition will cease, it may be that God will again permit it. And some of our rabbis have the opinion in Yalam Midenu, they say, commenting on the biblical expression, the Lord looseth the prisoners, he permits the forbidden. To sum up, I see no evidence nor any necessity from the Rambam's arguments that the immutability or irrepealability of law should be a fundamental principle of a divine law, generally, or of the law of Moses in particular. This is also the opinion of my teacher, Rabbi Halkkarim-Day, namely that it is not a principle or dogma of the law of Moses, but he says that it is a doctrine which everyone professing the Mosaic law should believe. The reason he gives is that if we examine all the parts of Mosaic law, we find that they embrace all those moral qualities and theoretical ideas which are calculated to give perfection to the soul in some manner. The reason is similar to that which we quoted above from Rambam's guides. We will come back to the subject and inquire from a different point of view whether the Mosaic law is liable to change as are other divine laws or not. This requires some preliminary consideration. You know what? I think that's probably a good point to stop today. I don't want to get partway into another chapter. But we will be back on Monday. Hopefully you guys are enjoying this. I know I really enjoyed yesterday's breakdown on the prophetic. And I'm just, the book gets just brilliant ideas for sure. I hope you're enjoying it. It's my pleasure to be able to share it and just to come to terms myself with something I've already read and was kind of wowed by, and always nice to review for sure. So yeah, so I think that will wind us down for today, but we will be back on Monday and continue with Book 3, Chapter 17, and I assure you there's some great material upcoming. And if anybody's got any comments or concerns or questions, feel free to drop it in the chat box, and I'll do my best to address it. I'm going to sign out now, and I will see you on Monday.